Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Need to Nerd podcast. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am not joined by Wes Singleton this week. Instead, I am joined by the CEO of my favorite company, Josh Sterling.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Josh.
You know, when I was a small child, Josh, I wanted to catch them all, and I'm getting there.
Yeah, you've. I was saying when you reached out, it's like you've got the Infinity Gauntlet, and you're just like pink, pink, pink. So I'm glad I can be one of the final stones. When Caitlin is off of her hiatus, maybe you can get her as well.
Yeah, that's the goal. We get Caitlin. We've collected them all.
Yeah, exactly.
So for those who don't know, by the way, Josh is the one of the hosts and the president of Nerd On, the podcast, Nerd On TV. What is actually the company name?
The company name is Nerd On Entertainment.
Nice.
We wanted something that could cover it all because we were like, we make everything. Like when we made our Patreon, we were like, what are we?
You know,
a multimedia company.
We might get into this during the podcast, but when I was needing to make an LLC for the Magic the Gathering podcast, I didn't want it to be just Magic the Gathering because I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into that and like have to make changes later. So
I'll tell you, it's we'll get into it later, but there's something about pigeonholing that we can talk about. Oh,
well, really quick, Josh.
Yes.
Why don't you? I mean, if you listen to this podcast, you probably know what Nerd On is. We've had Corey on, we've had Tom on, but why don't you really quickly, talk about not just Nerd On, but kind of what you do for a living and kind of this whole. I mean, it's weird to talk to you guys because like you're in my ears so much. It's funny because like podcast listeners of like constructive criticism have said that to me like lots of times, so like it's really weird to like interact with you. But you guys have been doing this now for 4 years.
Yes, I have the anniversary mug right here. 4 years. 4 years.
Yeah, why don't you quickly sell the listeners on Nerd On and then kind of talk about what you do?
Oh boy. Nerd On is we do 2 episodes a week. One episode is a news show, but the other one, our staple, what we were born on, is Nerd On the podcast. And it's just friends sitting around a table talking about the things that they love, from movies, TV shows, video games. I mean, we really do cover it all. We're starting to branch out and talk about other things. We've got some stuff planned to talk about the film industry since we all kind of work either in or around the film industry. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But I mean, we try to cover it all, really. And we stream on Twitch. So yeah.
Is Corey still going today?
Yeah, he is. He is at the time of this recording. He is, I think, like 10 hours in or something in.
That's crazy, man. It's funny for listeners. I don't know if I said this on Corey or Tom's episode that they came on, but when we started this show before we took a big hiatus, one of the things that I think is really important, and we'll talk about this later in content creation, is just like what are the other things doing that are similar to the thing that you're doing, like so I went and looked for nerd podcasts, but I specifically wanted podcasts about overall nerd culture. And what was weird, it was actually really hard to find any. Like you would think that like nerd culture podcasts would be like a dime a dozen, but there's so many niche podcasts.
They're niches. Yeah, they're niche. I mean, the thing is, and like I was saying earlier that we can talk about a little bit, is that since we are talking about the overall topic of content creation, there is actually something to be said about putting yourself in a box, so to speak, like this is an anime podcast or this is a movie podcast, because when you're an overall nerd culture content creator, the challenge, I don't like to say problem, the challenge is that you're not you can't funnel your focus in terms of how you market yourself, where do you push, where do you go, how do you, all those like business sides, the I always call it the boring back end of running a business. When you're a nerd culture, like you cover it all, you actually have a lot of audiences that you're like, oh, we could tap in over here, we could try to talk to these people, and then we could try to talk to these people, but you kind of, it's this balance that you have to find, and kind of speaking to them all, so to speak.
Well, you kind of mentioned what we're going to be talking about this week. We are going to be talking about just content creation overall. One of the things that is really important to me when I invite guests onto the show, whether it was Patty B coming on to talk about, oh my gosh, what is the name of the Halloween movie we did? It's the Three Witch Sisters, the
Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus. Thank you, Josh.
You're welcome.
Whether it's Patty B talking about Hocus Pocus or Corey coming on to talk about, KOTOR, I wanted to make sure that Josh got to talk about something that he's really passionate about, and I hope that this is a great time for you, and you get to really dive into something that you care a lot about.
I don't know, man. We'll see. I'm just kidding.
I hope so. Housekeeping, really quick. So, Valheim Night was great in the Discord. Thank you so much for those who joined. We will be continuing to do Valheim Nights. Hearth and Home did just drop, as well as other things that we'll be doing in the Discord. So, if you want to join the Discord, just check out the link in the show notes. It should give you an invite into that. Really quick announcement is that while West is in school, this podcast will be moving to bi-weekly. You might have noticed that we didn't podcast last week. It's really important to me that, we're not making money off of this, and I want to make sure that West, school is really important to him right now, and I want to give him the room he needs for his life. I will be making up for that with going back to creating YouTube videos on the YouTube channel. I already recorded my review of Mass Effect 3, and just need to find time to edit that, and so we'll continue to have weekly videos. It just will be a podcast and a video instead of a weekly podcast. With the housekeeping out of the way, don't forget to check out the Patreon. Help us create more, and I'm the type of guy that usually gives a lot of it back. So head on over to patreon.com/Heezy Game Media. All right, Josh, our main topic today, content creation. So I got to ask you this first question, which is why content creation for you?
Good question. I mean, I'm a performer at heart. I have been an actor since I was like, I worked it out the other day. I was like 14 when I went out on my first audition in high school. And ever since then, I went to college for acting, and, theater is a creative process. And then when I moved to LA, it was a really bad time in my life. My life basically imploded, and so I had to basically reanalyze where I was, what I was doing, what was doing anything for me. And I took a break from acting, and I went to audio school. And I got my Pro Tools certification, and I went there to study like music production. Mm-hmm. And because it's LA and you go to an audio school in LA, yes, you're going to get music production, but you're also going to get post-production. And this particular school that I went to focused actually in post-production, which is film, TV, that kind of thing. And I fell in love. I fell in love with it because it was such a cool thing to see things get made. I love movies. I grew up on movies. We had a huge VHS collection. Including like my mom made a binder that was basically, it was like we had a rental house in our house. Like it was a binder that had all of our movies.
I had a girlfriend who had this in their house. That was really cool.
And it had a lot of movies. And I worked in a video store. So I like movies. I like video games. I like that kind of thing. So it was cool to work in post-production and learn how it was made, but it's like having magic. It's like having some sort of magic. Like you're like, wait, now I can make these things.
Yeah.
Now I can like when we make something for Nerd On, it has a full process. It's not just like you throw something together. The content creation is not, I'm just going to throw something together. It's like there's a process. There's a process to making every single video, every single episode, blah blah blah. While I was in audio school, I learned to record music, and I am a musician, so I released an album. But it was just making. It's just like creating. I like making things.
And it's funny. The first podcast I did was really terrible. I don't even think it's on the internet anymore. And the thing that I fell in love with podcasting was, it helped, like, giving value to other people. And so my journey into content creation was very much like I think that the biggest thing for me is constructive criticism. Like this, 300 plus episode. Like we're on 8 years deep at this point, and the thing is like I saw a thing missing in a niche that I had the capability to talk about, and it's so different
that's where the value is.
yeah. It's so different than this or Nerd On, because here it's like I want an outlet to create and talk about the things that I care about. So it's like two very different sides of the content creation starting point for me.
Yeah. I mean, so for like podcasting for me specifically, I got into it by accident. Kind of. I mean, one of my best friends, if not my best friend, through college, his name was Buzz.
Is your wife hear you talking about this, or?
Yeah. Oh, that's not so. No, I mean, you know what I mean. So his name was Buzz, and he works in the film industries, and he already lived in LA and offered me a couch to stay on. And anyway, transfer 2 years. I'm making this story long and boring. A couple of years into audio school, he's like, "Hey man, you're doing audio, and I'm doing this podcast." It was called Same Shit, Different Show. And basically what it was about is about working in the film industry, but it was the behind the scenes. Like people would come on and tell crazy stories of what happened on set, things that they had to figure out. Working on a set can be crazy sometimes, and you have to just like, that doesn't work. Well, let's figure out how to make it work, or just like duct tape it together. And so it was like stories like that, writing process, that kind of stuff. There's all sorts of different kind of people on there. And he was like, "Hey, I just need somebody to edit my podcast and mix it for me." And I was like, "Hey, yeah, I need experience."
I'm not gonna lie, I hate working in editing. So
I see in your questions that we'll talk about it. I don't want to like spoiler alert, but okay. I'm not gonna, just because I'm an audio engineer doesn't mean that I like it. So there's the tease. Stay tuned for later. But it just kept happening. People just kept asking me, "Hey, I've got this," and then I started I started my own podcast called New Thought, New Song. I don't think that's on the internet anymore. And basically, I just talk to songwriters about writing songs, like where the idea came from, what it's like writing songs.
Sounds like a fun podcast.
It was really fun. I got to interview one of my favorite musicians ever, Ernie Halter. And that's the thing. I'm just random bit of wisdom. I'll give you pro tip. You can't get a yes unless you ask. If you find an email it. They just might be like, "Yeah, sure. I'll be on your podcast."
It's so funny you say that, and it's kind of a well, I'm going to talk about that when we kind of talk about like advice for content creation. But that's too funny. It's so real. I got to ask, because for me, like the first hundreds of episodes of constructive criticism, for example, audio only. But like, it feels like you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And
I actually follow a podcast that's about making a podcast and how to. It's funny enough. It's called Grow the Show. And what was funny
is
is
that the
like he
Blueberry
was.
podcast?
No, it's this guy out of Philadelphia. Seems to have some success, but anyway, he talks about growing a podcast. And at first, he was pretty. I don't want to adamantly is a strong word, but he was against putting your content on YouTube. And then recently, I think it was one of the big podcasting things. He came back from and he was like, "I was wrong. Put your stuff on YouTube." Because I'm sorry, I feel like I could tangentially go
dude,
off.
it's okay if you want to jump around the show notes. It is more than
Well,
fine.
what I was going to say is like YouTube. Yeah, I think you're right. To confirm is that I think that you're right, and the reason being, like the whole reason why we went to YouTube is like you're saying, it's podcasting is growing so much that it's no longer acceptable is a strong word, but it's no longer like you almost expect a podcast of any worth. That sounds really judgmental, and I apologize. You have to have video. People need a video, but that's not always true. That's not true across the board. Some people are like, "No, I only listen to you on audio."
No, it's crazy.
I don't
like you look at things like Gimlet Media, for example, right? Like you're not getting a Gimlet podcast on YouTube, but like that's their process is so different.
Yeah.
That it's not possible. I do want to ask you though, what medium is your favorite to create in?
I like video. I like video, like when we do video podcast, the Twitch streams, when we were making some gaming videos here and there and some IRL videos. It's just a fun medium to work with. Like, I'm not one of our video editors, though I have edited for us. I do dabble in video editing, and it's a fun thing to do. Like, you can be creative with it. But I like video because there's more of a, I have kind of like the attention span of a gnat sometimes. So it's nice to have, shiny lights and stuff and visuals going along with the audio medium.
Yeah, I think that like I look at the kind of the I'm the same way. Like I did audio for most of the time that I've done podcasting, and then I don't know, just like
I think that was natural. That's what the expectation was.
Right. And since diving into like the video side of stuff, like it's funny because I mentioned that I record my Mass Effect 3 review, but like I'm excited to get in there and like add effects to it, add splashes of different things as I talk about different things, and like like my ADHD, there's something about video that captures me in a pretty real way, and I listen to so many podcasts, but sometimes I'll find myself like 5 minutes through a podcast and be like, I don't remember what they were talking about.
Yeah, that's the thing with video, with audio specifically. I mean, it can happen with video, let's be real, but with audio specifically, it's very easy to just zone out. You just zone out. You're not listening, but with video. But I mean, on that note, it's not across the board. Some people don't like to watch long content on YouTube. Some people prefer audio podcasts. Some want those shorter episodes.
It's so funny.
So it's not a end all be all. It's just, and my whole point was that the whole reason why we went on to YouTube was that it was another place that people could find us.
Right.
That's that at the get-go, that was the only reason. It was like, okay, we were on all the major podcasting things, and then as we grew, it was like, oh, we can't just be on Apple and Spotify and blah blah blah. But Spotify came later. But we had to be on, Podcast Republic. We had to be on Radio Public. We had to be on, all these things. Oh, iHeart's now accepting podcasts. We got to be there. Oh, YouTube. Let's just, because our first probably 100 and some odd episodes were like a fancy visual,
right,
to the audio.
We still
just so that there was
have,
something.
we still have a podcast with the Constructive Criticism Network that's doing that. Like at some point, you just gotta, even if they're just consuming the audio, it still has to be where they are going to consume the media.
Yeah, exactly. And I call it the internet laziness factor. You put it where it's easy.
Yeah.
And make it as easy as possible for people to listen, watch, subscribe, whatever. If people want to watch it on YouTube or listen to it on YouTube, dope. Go you. Do the thing.
One of the things that our podcast has recently talked about, this podcast has recently talked about, is kind of our opening segment to whether it's a review or something like that. Like, how do we want to open up the show? And one of the things that I talked about was in our podcast meeting was like, there was an episode. It was I think the 1 year anniversary of Nerd On, and they did Lord of the Rings. And my favorite part of that show was actually the 15-minute synopsis done by, I think it was Corey.
It was probably Corey.
And I was just like, it was so funny too, because like, I remember, I think it was Caitlin was like, that was so long on the show. And I was like, that was amazing. I enjoyed every second of that.
Well, what's so funny is to pull back the veil a little bit so we didn't always do brief synopses. Synopses. I don't know. We would just talk about the things and we just get into it. And then we were like, no, let's start adding some production and brief synopsis. And our first brief synopsis, I think it was Batman Hush. And that synopsis went on forever. Even us looking back, we were like, I think it was like the week after when we were doing something else, we were like, so it's called brief synopsis. We should try to. So that's when we started like, oh, let's make a joke of it. Some things can't be made so quick that it's like, what was that? But you just like, a guy does a thing, this ensues, and then it ends. It's like you. But the first one we were like, that was painful for us to even listen to. Like,
the thing is like, we have decided to like kind of do like West will break down the thing, like,
yeah.
And I gotta ask, like, what kind of content do you listen to that you've kind of not necessarily just straight up taken from, but that you've built upon their ideas, or that you've like, how does that process work for you?
Can you be more specific? I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Like, I think about, in content creation, I think that there's so much.
Like what inspires?
Yeah. Like what inspires you? What bits and pieces have you said, I really like this, I want to do something similar on my show, I want to, this gave me this idea type of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, for me specifically, because I know that it's different for each host of Nerd On, I like watching how-to videos on YouTube, specifically like content creation how-tos, and watching, there's a couple of streamers that I really like, and I've emulated some of my stream setup for my streams on our channel. There's things that I've been like, I really like how he does that, I'm gonna do that. But I'll watch his videos. His name is Harris Heller, and his editor Sam. They just do some cool stuff, and like, you know what happens on YouTube. You watch something and you get stuck in this like rabbit hole and black hole, and you just click through and you just keep watching videos. And I mean, I like that kind of stuff. I mean, I've always thought it would be cool to be a reporter, that kind of thing. I mean, Nerd On's largely inspired by just like friends talking about stuff. Just like those water cooler talks of like friends catching up on the weekend. Like, what'd you do over the weekend? Oh, I went and saw this. Oh, how was it? What's your favorite part? What's your favorite character? That kind of thing.
It's funny that you say that because people have asked me often. They're like, "Why do you drink during your podcasts? Like, why do you have a drink in front of you?" And to me, it's like, well, I, I I think that it's important, like, that if I'm going to talk about something that I love, and I would normally talk about this thing while, having a hard seltzer or something, that, I don't think that it hurts to have that hard seltzer in front of me while I'm recording.
Yeah, you can edit out a large sip if you need to.
Actually, we had a huge debate once on constructive criticism because I really like the sound. I can't hear it on this because the ice cubes aren't big enough, but I like the sound of the clinking ice. And there are
both. You got like a fancy straw.
Oh yeah, dude, fancy. I got a whole.
You got a whole thing.
I got a whole bar over here. I'll show you after the show. But one of the things is like the water cooler talk, right? That what I want to capture is that passion. And I think that it's important to put yourself in a position to capture those passions, because the thing is like there's so much content out there, but
so much.
The thing is that people are attracted to people being happy and people being passionate about something.
Oh yeah.
It's actually, I think, why negativity sells so well is because it's really easy to be passionate about something in a negative way. It's
very easy to be negative. I was telling my cousin the other day, I was like, it's harder to choose being positive, especially in nerd culture, like from a standpoint of the larger scope of what we try to do at Nerd On. Not try, we it's our intention, we work really hard. We try to be positive, like even when we don't like something, like no matter what, if a topic comes to the table, somebody went through the process of making this.
Right.
Somebody put their passion on the line, so to speak, and they made this thing. And what I have to say about it in the long run doesn't really matter. But we try to see the value. That's why we don't allow below a 1-star rating. Like, it's like, no, there has to be at least some sort of rating above, like that. It's almost impossible to do that. But so it's very, very, it takes some work. That sounds weird, but
no, I actually
it's easy to be negative. It's easy to be negative.
I talked to Corey about this. It might have been after we recorded, but I actually talked to Tom about this. Like, I don't know if I said this on the podcast, but like, Tom as a person has changed so much during the time of you guys recording your show. And he went from, and I told Tom this, I said, Tom, I went from like not enjoying you as a content creator to like, you are now one of my favorite content creators. And you should be really proud of that. And I think that his positivity does a lot of that. And if you look at like what we do on this show, we during one of our last 2 segments on any review we do is we have love it's and could be betters. We don't frame we frame the things that we think could change, not as, I think you guys call yours, is it gripe? What do you call them?
Qualms.
Don't
say the gripe word. That was an all E word.
Oh, my bad.
Dr. Gripe. No, I'm just kidding.
But like we do could be betters, because it's not that it's bad, it's that this is the thing that we think could make this better. Yeah.
And it's a personal thing. It's like what you think, like,
right.
It's just your opinion, man. As the dude would say, it's just your opinion.
I've actually never seen that movie, but I definitely listened to your episode on it.
Watch it.
Well, I gotta ask this one. So one of I'm sure I actually just assumed this when writing the show notes. But
Assume
I think
away.
It's pretty true that one of the biggest questions that podcasters get, when you've been podcasting as long as you and I have, is, how do you do it? How do you get started? Where do you go? Like, what do I need? What do I have to do? And I was curious if you felt like you had a unique perspective on this.
I like to think that I'm a unique snowflake on this. Because what I tell people, I was actually on the Blueberry podcast and they asked me this, and this is probably always going to be my answer. You have to get started in podcasting. It's not about the gear. It's not even about the title of your podcast. It's really about a number of things, and you have to be clear about those things. Like, what is your show about? What you were talking about, what is the value that it brings? What is something that somebody is going to listen to for maybe hours? But the other thing that I would tell people is, what is it to you? Is it a hobby or is it a business? Because I think that those two things are very different. And not saying that somebody can't be business oriented about a hobby, but they require a different amount of, I don't know if focus is the right word. A different energy, a different what you put into it. A hobby has some leeway, whereas a business doesn't as much. The reason why I say that, yeah, sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying, I really like that. I look at my Magic podcasts as a business, and I know that for me, I'm trying to make sure that West views this podcast as a hobby, even though I'm going to treat it like I treat my other podcasts. And one of the reasons for that is, like, I want to make sure that this is just fun for for West, because it's the energy I need him to bring to the podcast. Whereas, like, for me, it's like, I'm gonna write show notes just like I would. We're gonna do a monthly planning meeting where we plan our next 8 episodes. We're gonna do, in that monthly planning meeting, we're gonna talk about our love it's could be better for the show, and like what are the things that we want to do to improve. What are the things that we liked and stuff like that. And it's funny because, like, I think so many people think that podcasting is pretty often just getting in front of a microphone and just saying the words that you think. And for me, it's the back end work is, I mean, I have Discords for each of my podcasts where, we write show ideas, we leave our notes from the last podcast meeting, we dump info and facts for the next episode, to pull up during the show.
We have our business Discord, and it has probably like 30 different channels for different things. Like, this one is dedicated to talking to our video editor. This is for this. This is for this. Oh, and the thing is, and the other thing to bear in mind is, like, when you have multiple hosts, when we started, we were 5 hosts. We were 4 hosts and then 5. But when you have 5 hosts, that's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And it's very, very easy for it to just be like all over the place. And you have to focus it. And so that's why it's good to be organized. That's the other thing that I would tell people when getting started, is be organized. Like what you're talking about with show notes, it just keeps you organized. It keeps you, because nobody, including potential podcasters, I guarantee you that you've heard a podcast that you were like, wow, they don't know what's going on. And when you have show notes, it allows you to kind of like, at the beginning, Tom used to call it the script, but it's just an outline. You can go off the outline, but it's just there just in case. So, like, because anything could happen, anything can throw off your game. Something can come in, a text message you might glance at, something. I don't know. There's a million ways that your focus could get just off of somewhere else. And the show notes are kind of like, oh yeah, that's where I was.
It's really funny you say that. So when we started constructive criticism, the first thing I did was reach out to the host of what is the biggest Magic the Gathering podcast. It's called Limited Resources. And, I just said, hey, I'm, starting a new project. I've been a listener of yours for years. I really appreciate how much detail and it goes into your show, and I was curious if, you could give me any advice on show notes. And he's like, I'll just send you our show notes from the last 2 weeks. And
that's dope.
He sends them to me, and they are pages and pages long.
Yeah.
And I looked at this, and every single podcast that has come on the Constructive Criticism Network, I have sent those show notes to. I said, in case you want to know what the biggest, most successful Magic the Gathering podcast looks like behind the scenes, this is it.
One, if you look up like content creation, like even I'm still toying with this idea, but when I was originally toying with it and just doing R&D, looking up vlogging, if you look that up, one of their top most, probably 9 times out of 10, most times they're going to tell you, write a script. Even if you don't like stay to it like to a T, write a script. And that's for podcasting, that's your show notes, your outline. It's important to stay organized because especially in modern day, you're on so many different places, different kinds of content. There's a lot. I am a firm believer that if you are organized out here, your physical reality, you will be more so inclined to be organized in here in your mind.
Dude, I wish I was half as organized at work as I am in podcasting.
I mean, that's the thing, is it applies to all. It's like everything is this incestuous circle that you can use. Everything kind of crosses. People can't see my hands, but everything crosses, and you can use one thing from another and another to the thing. Like I use things that I learned in music production in audio mixing, and things I learned in post-production in music mixing, or stuff like that.
I'm the same way. One of the things that I brought from I work in software. I'm a product manager in software.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I brought to podcasting is problem to be solved, and personas. And so, for my Magic podcast, like we create a list of personas of who our target audience is, what type of episodes do they come for, what do they, just marketing stuff. And it's so helpful to like know who you're trying to talk to.
Yeah. And like for me, I work, so I didn't go into this. I am professionally what I am is I am a voice actor.
Yeah.
I am an audio mixer, a content creator, a podcast producer, but the thing that's kind of the crown on the pyramid that is Josh's financial monies is audio mixing. And so I've worked in a few different post-production houses, and I've taken the way that a post-production house organizes, and it's even more than, like, I've worked in some places that it's just to the nth degree. It's just like every little step that needs to happen in creating something is notated, and people are kept in line. Sounds really like, I can't think of the word.
No,
but
I gotta ask now, because
yeah,
I would assume that podcasting with me is a nightmare, because like not for you. I was not talking about for you. That's even funnier if that's true. But like for my co-hosts who are less, like, I'm very process oriented, results driven, and so like for me, like pull back this curtain, like I was apologizing to Josh that I had to write show notes on my phone this week, because like they're just not there. I mean, it was so funny because what?
I said stop apologizing.
I know, but
you didn't do anything wrong.
It's so funny because like one of the things that Tom commented on, he's like, oh my gosh, your guys' show notes are like, you guys are typing it in them ahead of time and like, filling out this huge sheet. And I just felt so bad. I was like, I'm not giving this to Josh because I'm like having a rough week. But
he's gonna judge me. He's gonna think I'm less than. He's gonna have no respect for me. He's not even gonna talk to me in the Twitch chats. This is bad.
But the thing is I really do think that having this structure to content creation makes it easier, and I want to talk about that with our next point, which is we talk podcasts are a dime a dozen. Like there's so many podcasts.
Yeah,
The thing is,
and every actor is starting to have one. Every movie studio has one. HBO has one for every show. There are so many podcasts for everything. The joke used to be there's an app for that. There's a podcast for that.
Well, what's crazy is I once saw how much YouTube content gets created. Like it is mind-boggling that there is a YouTube worth of YouTube content created every day.
Yeah.
Like it's
every single day.
Exponential. Every single day, as much content as there is on YouTube is created again the next day.
Yeah. And what's cool about that, like what gets me all, because you asked me, you were like, you know, I need you to come to the I want you to come to the table with something that you just need to nerd out about. And content creation for me, like when you break it down to its core, it's just making things. It's creative ideas. One of my slogans in my audio business is my passion is to help others bring their passion to life and in high quality. I love the idea of like all of these videos out there. If you just think about where like everybody started with something, they started somewhere and it was nothing. You know, it's like we I think Tom made the joke on a recent episode from referencing another recent episode from Harry Potter when he's like, all these major wizards started where we are. Why can't we do it? And so it's inspiring to me to see so much content on YouTube because you have these people. Not all YouTube content is positive and great, but we don't watch it. But there's a lot of like a lot of content out there that is just like, you made this. This is so cool. Like this is an idea that you had. I went through the process of making it.
I was literally thinking this during the Nerd On update this week. You can just feel the passion and effort that you guys put into it. And I think that, you know, you and I have both created content for what my parents would say is an inappropriate amount of time. But the thing is, you know, I've got this constructive criticism playmat hanging on my wall, and this last week, you know, I when I rejoined the show, you know, we're gonna hit 400 episodes next year. And
nice.
It is crazy how few podcasts get to 100, and this podcast will get to 100 next year.
Dope. Congrats.
Oh, thank you. And I think that I want to discuss between the two of us, why do you think we were able to do it? Like what was the difference between Nerd On and I want to say the West Wings podcast. The video I'm talking about, the guy. Anyway, it's a meme. It's a guy that eats wings and talks about the West Wing.
Okay.
It's called.
Maybe you ran out of content. No. It's a number of things. You have to want to. You have to want to, and if you don't want to anymore, if it's a drag, if there's resentment, if there's anything that's negative, because here's the thing, it may be an audio mainly medium. Yeah, there's YouTube videos, but as an actor, what I learned as an actor on the stage, people can tell. They may not know what it is, but they can tell that something's happening. And if you have any sort of negative emotion, it comes out in the way that you talk, in the way that you react to other people. So you have to want to. You have to be dedicated, and you have to have resilience, and the ability to, no matter what, keep going. Like, no matter if you got a bad review, if you got a bad YouTube comment, Whether somebody comes into your Twitch stream and goes, "This guy's boring," or "Why are you streaming this?" or "Your guys' episode was dumb. I hate the sound of that guy's voice," or all these things that have actually happened. You have to be willing to put up blinders, in a sense, and just focus on the thing, the podcast, the content creation company.
I think I disagree
Hell
about a
yeah.
little bit of this.
Yeah.
Because for me, we had a listener who was not a regular listener, but it was somebody who I'm gonna pull him up because
you also have to be willing to be flexible.
Yeah.
Like you were saying with your co-host going to school, life happens. And you have to be able to take those things in stride and pivot and be able to change. If something needs to change for the quality of life of a host or whatever, you have to be able to change. Because if you don't do that, it builds up that. It can potentially build up stuff that just gets in the way of the positive message that you might have. But what were you going to say?
I did find the person. His name is Eric Landez, and he left a pretty mean. He said a pretty mean thing to me on Twitter once. And I think that, well, I felt like it was mean. I think that it's so easy on the internet to like see somebody as I don't know, I don't know that not human's the right word, but like feel like you can say whatever you want. And he made a comment about how I podcasted and how I was on the podcast. And I took it and I said, you know what? If he's willing to say this, I bet there's a lot of people who aren't. And so I adjusted how I was on the podcast. And I said, hey, Eric, I took your feedback and I'm going to improve on this. I promise you that. He then started listening to the show and he became a Patreon supporter for years and years and years. And when I asked feedback from our patrons about why they became patrons, he actually said that it was me and like my willingness to adjust and change and put my money where my mouth was when, the point of constructive criticism is to be always improving. You can always be better, today than you were yesterday. Feedback. And I remember one time I got in a similar vein, I got a text from, I got an accidental text from my best friend. And it said something along the lines of, I don't comment on Spencer's feelings or what he's thinking because I think he's always either hypocritical or wrong. And it was for somebody else. And I saved that text for years. And one of the reasons for that was I wanted to be a different person than who that text was about. Yeah. And I think that, for us, I don't have our YouTube comments are actually approval only. I think it hurts our content, but I think that what I want out of a YouTube comment section is positivity and I'll approve negative comments about my content. But I want to make sure that like when somebody goes to the comment section that they're not getting, something weird. So while I agree that, full steam ahead is true, and I don't know that blinders I agree with.
I think it's maybe I did not speak my point well. I don't mean blinders. I mean more of a resiliency to be able to continue forward. To be clear, we had the show has changed significantly due to a different feedback from internal feedback, meaning our own. We actually all met in a retail store, and I think we've said it on the show, so I'll say it here. We all worked at Apple, and the culture of Apple retail is pretty amazing, but they have what they call, feedback. And it was a part of everyday work life where you could, if something happened that, and it could be positive feedback, but if it was negative feedback, you had to be willing to either A, take it in the moment, or B, be like, you know what, I can't right now, but I will hear it later. So, we have internal feedback, but we also we have reached out. We've kind of released surveys to our audience, Patreon, Discord, all that different stuff. And, listen, one specific example is like the qualm section of our show used to have no like barriers. And it would just be like, okay, what are your qualms? And we had times where the qualm section went on for 30 minutes.
I actually remember this change for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I actually might have been on that survey if that was from a survey. I was like, dude, your qualms on this specific episode were 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I
mean, we had a couple of people that there were even people that DM'd us and been like, I stopped listening because I know when we first started, one of our listeners was very vocal about how positive we were. And they gave us some of this feedback where they stopped listening as much because the qualms, basically it was like just it was just qualm city for some things.
One of the things I'm getting from this conversation right here kind of highlights, I talked about earlier just my love for Tom and his ability to adapt and change, and just like how he's become one of my favorite creators. And I think that I remember one time reading your guys's I think it was your Apple reviews, and there were comments about Tom in those reviews, and I thought to myself, you know what, this is how you get better. This is how you improve. I talked about how this Eric guy, he had some things to say about me, and I think one of the reasons that what it sounds like is that the reasons that the podcasts that we've done for so long have lasted for so long is because we're willing to internalize and figure out, okay, how can I make this better? And being that process of improving the show and making the show into this thing that you believe it can be is like a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and it's like, I always think too is that when you get like negative feedback like that, or sometimes it's not so constructive, but if it's negative feedback, it may just be one person, one comment, but I guarantee you somebody else is thinking it. They just don't have the wherewithal to comment that thing. And so it's anytime we get a comment, sometimes some things are like, there's no actionable way for me to
fix. You gotta
I'll
let
listen
those
to
ones
it.
go.
I'll listen to it, but it's like there's no actionable way for me to improve that. But you get some that, make you stop. You kind of go, okay. But I think the for us as a show, it's been our ability as co-hosts to, like, the monthly meetings, having those meetings and being able to have those real moments of like, hey, can I give you some feedback?
I love that you guys do monthly meetings too, because I'm sure everybody who podcasts with me is like, you want to have a meeting about our internet talk show? I'm like, yes.
Yeah, because you got a plan. It's not just we're not just throwing this together. We want it to be high quality content, and high quality content needs prep. But yeah,
Oh, I was just gonna. No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that internally we've been able to. I mean, I've grown as a human just from being a part of this podcast, and the things that, and I know that each of my co-hosts have grown based on the discourse that we've had between each other of like, hey, this needs to get better, or I like how he does that, or hey, can we stop doing that, or that kind of stuff. And I'm not great at. I've gotten better at it. This show has made me better at being able to say those kinds of things of like, hey, I feel like this, and be valued in the room of like, hey, I feel like this. And so
It's funny. I actually think psychological safety is really important on a podcast with multiple hosts.
Oh, definitely.
I think that if you don't feel psychologically safe, then your content itself will sound different because you're not willing to say the things that you'd be willing to say in front of these people otherwise.
I'm willing to bet money that a comment that we often get on our show is the chemistry that we have together. And I think it's because of those moments that we've had, those hard moments. There's been times that, I'll be honest, I had to stop recording because I was having an emotional reaction. Something happened and I felt really hurt, and I couldn't continue.
Yeah.
And there have been those moments. There's been anger moments. There's been like WTF moments. Like, why would you do that kind of moments? And it's like, and I think that being able to get through, I sometimes liken it to a marriage in a sense of like, you have to be able to have those difficult conversations. You have to be able to argue. You have to be able to.
Have you listened to the podcast Startup?
I have not.
Oh, you go.
But
binge,
I'm going to write it down.
You need to go binge that.
Okay.
It is a podcast about a guy who he leaves This American Life to start his own podcast company, and this podcast is called Startup, and it is about his journey. It is him recording his journey to creating this podcast company.
Mm-hmm.
And it is maybe the best podcast of all time.
Wow.
It's really good. But he talks about you got to listen to it. I don't want to spoil it for you, but he does talk about that marriage aspect of being in a company. And Heezy,
especially a company like a small company, when you're like a small business, support small business. It's like we have within us, we have us hosts. We also have Capeless Crusaders, and then we have kind of, I don't want to say residual. They're outliers that are really important. Yeah. Like Julie, our video editor. So our team is like 10 people, and that's a really small number. And it's very easy to.
If you hurt somebody's feelings, it can really mess.
Yeah, it can. But,
I love that. I want to say one more thing on it, but I kind of don't. So
you can.
I know it's my show, Josh. I know I'm not.
I'll do what I want.
It's funny because I remember back in the day, dude, recording got really hard at one point when we had 3 hosts, and one of the reasons is like we found it really important to record in the same room, and but we didn't have an audio interface. We didn't have the money to get the equipment for stuff, and so we'd all record on our own laptops in the same room with our own headsets, and then you would hear feedback and
sync it up and figure that out.
It was so rough. And I remember after we got the audio interface, and we would all record in my man cave, my co-host Casey used to tap on the table when he would make a point. And I legitimately remember one time I stopped the show. I was like, dude, if you do that one more time, if you do it one more time, I'm kicking you off the show. You'll never be on another episode. I've asked you not to do this 3,000 times. Just put your hands somewhere else. And I know that you're probably yeah, I've been there, man.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is we laugh about this idea of when you start a business with friends, it's much different than when you just work for a company. Guarantee you, all of us hosts, because we all split the responsibility of running this company. All of us have jobs. All of us have no doubt done a fireable offense.
Yeah.
Forgot to post something, totally dropped the ball, those kinds of things where it's just you're running a business with friends where you're just and we're you said earlier, it's you're not making money. Thankfully we are now, but not a lot.
I shouldn't
have said that. Show is running. The show runs itself. That we can talk about that at some point because it does deal with content creation. But there's a certain amount of I am so angry right now, but my empathy,
dude,
because I understand.
I should not have said that earlier, by the way. Heezy Game Media LLC makes, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars per year, but so much of it goes back into the, I'm sure you guys are the same way, where it's like, I don't need this money right now, and I would much rather make this a job one day, and in order to do that, all of this has to just go back. Like all of it.
I mean, we've had people come in. The thing is, our goal, that's another important thing. Have goals.
Oh, definitely.
Have goals of where you want to be, what you want to do with the company, and that kind of thing. Have a 5-year plan. But one of our goals is to pay our people. Us as hosts, we're the founders, we're the board, blah blah blah. We are like literally, legally, we are officers of this corporation.
Right.
But in our minds, like anytime money comes in, sponsorships, Patreon, Twitch, all those different things, it immediately in our minds goes, how can we go back into where can that go in the company? Where can we can upgrade our cameras. We can audio equipment, we're good, but like we immediately think that aspect, and then we're like, oh, then there's marketing, and then there's this, and it's like, and the one thing that we think about is paying our people, the people that, like, my dream, my goal right now that I would love, and I think we don't have to segue to this, but it's going to talk about a little bit, is that I would love to get a post-production audio editor.
Oh man, I'm excited to talk about this because so you play a little bit of Magic, right?
A little bit.
Do you know who Sam Black is?
Huh?
Do you know who Sam Black is?
I do not.
So Sam Black is probably a future Magic the Gathering Hall of Famer. He's also arguably the best draft Magic player in the world. And also arguably the best deck builder of all time.
Wow. And
he hosts a podcast called Drafting Archetypes that is on the Constructive Criticism Network.
Nice.
And the first thing I did with my share of the podcast was hire an editor. I literally just couldn't. I can't. I had a vision for what I wanted it from a production side. The production side I really like being a producer. Like I've actually been offered the opportunity to be a producer in film before and like have my say that way, and that's something that I'm really interested in. But like, and I love producing podcasts. I hate editing. I hate it so much. And
I get it.
It's so funny too, because like I think that it's just so many negative times. Like if you've done a podcast, you've lost audio, you've lost video, you've had one person's mic not cooperate or whatever. You probably don't have that problem because you know how to do everything. But like so much of my podcasting has been trial by fire that like I just have a negative feeling when editing a show.
I get it. I mean, it's with my background, podcast editing is essentially dialogue editing, and dialogue editing is no joke. But there's different schools of thought. It depends on how much editing you do. For us, real talk, we don't do a lot of editing.
I actually really appreciate that about your show, and I think about the fact that you guys leave in your ums. I also leave in the ums. I think that taking out the ums gives this, I don't know, it's like this this false sense of what is happening during the conversation. And I thought this as I was working on Sam's podcast and editing it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to listen to like 5 podcasts. I want to understand how many ums are people leaving in. It's fun if you want to like take out huge pauses and like stuff like that, but like at what point did you say because your brain was processing and it needed to catch up to your mouth, or your mouth needed to catch up to your brain, right? And I actually really love that about your show.
Well, I appreciate that, because to be perfectly honest, if it was the other side of the coin, if we were the kind of show that did that, we would not create as much content as we do. that kind of editing, um for the CW Podcast Network, I can actually say this. I'm also a podcast audio producer for the CW. And the kind of editing that they want is that kind of editing. Very clean, very, there are a lot of major shows that do that. They edit out they edit out dead air. I mean, we'll edit out dead air, like, because when you're dealing with an audio mainly medium, if a listener stumbles or is listening and then all of a sudden there's like
they think the show turned off.
2 seconds, yeah, they're like, oh shoot, what's
right?
Did something happen? Like technically, like with my podcast player, is there something wrong? But when it comes to that kind of editing, it's like we literally have like 1, 2, 3, 4 edit points in our show, and it still takes a long time because it's long form media. We usually average about 60 to 75 minutes, but sometimes we've had episodes that are 2 hours long. And even just from a processing standpoint for like Pro Tools, that takes some time. And it takes time because as an editor, as a mixer, it's not just like, okay, it's edited, boom, done. You want to make sure it sounds good. So you're listening to this point, you're listening to Tom talk, you're listening to Corey talk, you're listening to Josh talk, to Caitlin talk, and you're making sure that they're all kind of the same level, ish. And so there's a lot to bear in mind. I don't know how to sell audio. I think it's one of those things that like I got into it because sometimes things fall in your lap and you're like, I'm good at that. I'm going to give that a whirl, and I am good at it. I've learned to be fast at it.
That's how I got my job too.
Yeah, and something an acting teacher told me over this past week, sometimes you got to do what you got to do the things that you love.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you have to do that.
No, it's definitely true. Actually, that's a really good advice. That was an acting teacher that said that to you?
Yeah.
That is really good advice. I think about this a lot one of the things that I really loved so far about, content creation is how much of it you talked about. I don't remember what word to use, but you talked about how so much of it feeds into life and into.
I think I said incestuous.
Oh, I wasn't gonna say that. So, but like, I hate editing. But the thing is like, I don't have a choice. Like, West is not going to edit this podcast, nor does he have the time, the want, the motivation. The reason I rejoined constructive criticism is because I wanted a certain standard for that podcast that I didn't think that they had the time to do. And I was like, well, I will quit my other podcast to help you guys. Like, that is how important this is to me.
Yeah.
And you have to do what you got to do. You mentioned something a few minutes ago, and we're like really off show notes right now, so in case people are wondering, but you mentioned,
this is what happens. You just kind of let it flow.
You kind of mentioned this idea about editing that was really interesting to me. Behind the scenes, I made Josh be quiet for 5 seconds so that I could easily identify where to edit this episode.
Yeah.
I'm curious, do you have tips and tricks for those who, like for me, I use Camtasia 9 to edit the video, and then I actually export the audio from YouTube directly to put it on the podcast stuff. And like, I have a full-on process that I go through with every episode. And you guys are on something else. We're on Anchor. You guys are sponsored and on
Podbean.
I'm curious, like, if I were to start any podcast right now, there's not even a world in which I would do it the way that I did constructive criticism. Like, this podcast right here doesn't have its own website. We did when we started it, but now, like, I use Anchor, which is now owned by Spotify, I guess, but like, there's so many things that I've learned to make my life as a podcast producer easier? I'm curious if there's anything you want to share.
I mean, just really quick, the whole reason why we have a podcast website was it was another place for people to listen. And there's something like kind of, I don't know, it's kind of like a digital resume. Things that I've learned from a workflow post-production standpoint. I mean, it depends. I mean, like in a remote setup, like when we do like the update is now a remote show. Or man, during all of the pandemic quarantine, like
aren't all shows remote right now for the most part, other than
yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy. Like in studio, it's really easy. We're either recording into this. I can't even tell you how. It's very rare that I find a piece of gear that I'm like, no, this changed my life.
Oh, you mean like this headset that I'm wearing because of your podcast? Because oh my gosh,
you're welcome. The Rodecaster Pro by Rode.
I have that mic down in my closet.
It's their bar. It's their mixing board.
I'm thinking of the Rodecaster.
Yeah, their Rode NT. They have a whole bunch of stuff, but their Rodecaster Pro, their board. Anyway, that's a tangent.
That's okay.
Basically, like when we're in studio, I'm handling the recording, and it's either it's recording into Pro Tools to different channels. Everybody has their own channel. And if something happens during the show, usually because Tom handles what we call the QC, because we have had an episode go to air that had a whole section that was supposed to be edited out.
I've done that
but
too.
But it didn't get edited out, and it happened like a couple of weeks after we were. I think Tom was listening, and he was like, "Yeah, so that whole section that we were supposed to edit out didn't get edited out." Yep. So we started the process because it's impossible. Like true editing. What you would do is you would listen to it real time, and you would edit. And you would listen to the whole show.
It takes so long, too, because every edit takes at least 5 seconds. At least 5 seconds.
So imagine an hour to 2 hour podcast. It would take days with a full-time job, with a marriage, with life, doing the laundry, the dishes, all these things. It's like if some reason obviously I would do it because, you have to, but I would be so pissed if I had to do it that way. I wouldn't be able to do it. I would not be able to produce as much content as we do if we did that kind of editing. But basically what happens is during the show, if something happens, Tom and I kind of have a little internal conversation of like, oh, that happened at 45 minutes and 20 seconds.
I used to do this too. I used to message myself on Facebook Messenger with the timestamp of when I needed to edit.
I also usually have my keyboard like on the table with me, and I know how to make a marker. It's just a quick key for Pro Tools, and I make a marker. Nice. For remotes, the clap is really important, like clap sync. So it's really easy to sync up. Like if you're recording with Zoom, it's like you can record with Zoom, and you can take their reference track.
Let's be very clear. Do not record with Zoom.
No, don't. You can. Let me just be clear. You can, but you shouldn't. We learned one thing I would say, the lesson that I have learned, do not use Skype. Ever.
Yeah, we
did. Our very first big guest was Kevin Conroy, and we did Skype. And I had to do so much post-production to clean it up.
Yeah, we used to do Skype too. I got to ask you, behind the scenes a little bit, what do you think of this? Isn't this video and audio like so much better than you're expecting when I sent you a web link?
No, it's fantastic, and that's the thing is like I think the pandemic really, the what I said earlier when you were asking like how to get into podcasting, that kind of thing, the audio side is easy, and tools for doing this for content creation are becoming available at the fingertips. Do a Google search and you'll find something like this. You'll find Riverside, I think it's what it's called. You'll find OBS Ninja. You'll find all these different things that even Zoom was around. What?
I was saying, what is OBS Ninja?
Oh, OBS Ninja is amazing. It's free, which is incredible, but it allows you to do, like you were watching our update
Yeah.
live on Twitch. Wasn't the video quality insane?
Yeah.
OBS Ninja. It basically
Did it
kind of
upscale your camera?
No,
You have a
our
4K
cameras are
camera anyway,
4K.
right?
We
Yeah.
have 4K cameras, but the quality is translated and it's near lossless latency. And it's just this guy that was like, if you watch the video, it's really inspiring. It's just this guy that was so tired of there not being a remote option for high quality video conferencing for streamers, for companies, and he just developed it himself. And he's like, do it, have it, use it. It's free.
It's so funny because like I bought this webcam because I could not get my DSLR to sync up to my computer the way that I wanted it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you using a DSLR right now, by the way? I have to ask.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
It's a cam link. And
I'll buy one.
This is actually like one of the, we made a huge, like we saved up our money for a while of because Corey had this idea of because he got a Blackmagic camera and he's like, it's when you play the what if game too, when you're a content creator, wouldn't it be cool what if we got one of these? What if this happened? And we invested in this at first, right before the pandemic started, before streaming gear went through the roof.
Oh my gosh, dude, it's crazy.
I hope your audience likes this kind of talk, just talking tech talk.
It's okay.
Tech porn.
I'm having fun, so.
But yeah, I mean, it depends on the camera too, but we got these cam links. And it allows, I mean, it depends on the camera. These cameras have clean out, meaning that they don't have the interface showing, like the frame rate or all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
It's too funny because I actually think, because that's the Elgato cam link, and I think that Elgato makes
that thing right there can do what the cam link does.
So that's why I bought it, but I couldn't get it to work. We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it off air. It's too funny, man. It's funny because when you said you wanted to talk about content creation, I was like, dude, we're gonna nerd out so hard. It's it's gonna be hard to edit, but I think this has been a good conversation.
Yeah.
I think the last thing that I would want to talk about is just kind of how do you think that your life has improved from content creation? How do you think that you are you happier? How would you quantify it?
Wow. I mean, I will always say this. My co-hosts are incredible people. I love my co-hosts and I think that we make an incredible team. And as a person, if I think back to September 2017 when we started this show, we talked a little bit in the DMs about anxiety, a little bit. I had a lot more anxiety. I had a lot more stuff going on. Mind you, I've gone to therapy a little bit, but my
really quickly, can we just mention that therapy is the best and that any stigma around it is BS? And if you feel like you need a therapist, you should do it because it's just amazing.
Yeah, I will be on that train and say that I think everybody should, even if it's just for a couple of sessions, even if it's just for a month.
Yeah, most works actually will pay for your first 4 sessions of therapy for any issue for free.
Yeah, it's really important to take care of your mental health.
Yeah.
Really important. But my co-hosting team have just been, they've been incredible to lift me up. Sometimes you got things going on in your head, and for me, when I said anxiety, or sometimes I even went through kind of that imposter syndrome of I have no place at this table. All I have to say, there are several episodes that I walked away from in my own head of I brought no value to that conversation. All I said was good things about the thing. And then one day and one day a listener spoke to me and said, "No, I need your side of the conversation. I I like your like I tend to be the one that will give something above a 4-star because I like the thing." That's a Caitlin phrase, but it's like most often I'm gonna like the thing. It's very rare that I'm like, nah, I didn't like that.
I actually remember you on an episode. I'm trying to remember what episode it was, but you actually specifically mentioned how you didn't feel like there was like room for you in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, because it's like, how do I? Corey and Tom, they're academics when it comes to film, I believe. Much more able to, not saying that I can't be, because I can be from a different point of view, from a acting standpoint, even from an audio standpoint, have come to the table with a criticism that is like they can come with writing and filmmaking from that standpoint. But even in that point of what I was just saying, I'm quantifying my value to the show compared to the value that my hosts have. And based on this value, based on their knowledge and what they bring to the show, which I respect, I'm automatically placing myself below them because I respect them. And what they've done, I'm working on it. As you can tell, I'm working on it. But they've really helped me to see my value in the conversation. And to honestly, before Nerd On, I was a closeted nerd. If you look around this studio, I'll loosen this up. A lot of this, like posters, figurines, books, a lot of it, yeah, I've gotten it over the time of Nerd On and decorated this studio, but a large portion of it was stuff that I had in boxes.
Right.
And Nerd On has allowed me to be me, to wear a Superman shirt, to be like, yeah, I like that thing. And it's okay that I like that thing, and I don't need to say anything bad about that thing, and that's okay.
You know what is really great is it feels like, I don't know if it's like the past like 3 years or whatever, but stuff like, all of a sudden like anime being like straight up mainstream, like going from, do you know, like I'm sure you've heard Tom talk about this too, but like I had to work hard to watch anime.
We've talked with even guests about how hard it was to get a hold of anime.
Yeah, you guys actually talked to Jeff about this, right?
Yeah,
because Jeff was talking about how he was.
Well, Jeff and even Miles from at the time he was with Crunchyroll. No,
yeah. I remember that one too. But actually, Jeff brought up a really good point though on your guys' show. Jeff Nimoy, for those who are like, obviously we're having like an inside conversation all of a sudden. They've had Jeff Nimoy on 4 times.
I think 4 times, yeah.
Jeff Nimoy, the voice of Tentamon, director of Digimon Season 2, and then the point he was making was actually about Trigun.
Yeah, because he's Nicholas D. Wolfwood.
Yeah, and it was really interesting to hear him talk about like just not understanding how big Trigun was, because like to him it was like just this thing. And I think that like things like anime becoming mainstream, things like comic book movies becoming mainstream, and just the internet overall, I was having this conversation at work, just like, let nerddom be. I can find somebody with similar interest to me now. Like there's just it like I don't know if you've noticed the poster, the metal poster behind my head over here.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I'm literally on a podcast with a person who loves my favorite character in all of media. Like right now, there are 2 people. I straight up almost offered to have that be the podcast topic, by the way. I almost was like, do you just want to talk about Deku for like 2 hours? But but I actually think it's crazy that we've come to this point in the world, and I'm actually really glad that that's happened for you. Like you've gotten to be more of yourself. It's probably made you a lot happier. So
yeah, it's that, and it's also more confident. from a pulling back the curtain a little bit, I am the president of Nerd On, so I have to run a lot of the back end and to make sure that Nerd On, not I don't do it all, but it's kind of like I oversee it all and just look at the puzzle and make sure that the puzzles are fitting, and I'm good at it. I'm good at staying organized and keeping other people organized. And that's made me confident. This show has made me, get back to acting. It's like that was a passion in my life, so much so that I didn't have a plan B until I had to have a plan B. It's like this show has changed my life in many ways. I mean, I'm being me. I think.
Love it, man. I really do. I love it. That's gonna do it for content creation and our discussion with Josh today. Josh, if people want to talk to you about Paddington or Deku, where can they do that?
You can follow me on Twitter, just Joshinya, JUSJOSHIN, YA. I'm really going to hold on to that username because I've had it.
The screen for those on YouTube, and it is on the show notes for those who are...
on Instagram, it's the same thing, but the JOS of my name of Joshinya is a 0. But just follow me on Twitter. That I think that has links to everything. And then, of course, follow Nerd On. Pretty much Nerd On TV on everything, except for Twitch. It's Nerd On.
So I want to be clear that I donated a lot of money to the KOTOR stream, and I need to know when they're going to continue.
When the KOTOR streams are going to go? That is not a me question. That is you better beat Corey down.
But what more can I do than donate the dollars, Josh? Than donate the dollars?
Yell at him.
I won't yell at him. I'll text him though.
Go ask nicely.
I'll text him bro, this is the best part. Think of that MedPack meme, guys. You can find me at Spencer13H. You can find the show at Need to Nerd Pod. You can find West at East_monotone. Sub, and review. It's so funny how impactful a review is. I know so many of our listeners have told me hey, I don't have the money to go to Patreon right now. The pandemic's been really hard. How else can I support? It's just leave a review on iTunes. Or Apple Podcasts.
Leave a review everywhere that you can, even Podchaser. Guerrilla marketing is a thing. Share with your friends and family. Like that. The other thing that I would tell podcasters just starting, don't discount your fans that are friends and family, because they're still fans.
Man, you had a family member listen to a podcast of yours? That's so powerful, Josh.
I try. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't think a single one member of my family has ever listened to anything.
You don't know that.
Oh, hold on. No. Whoa, stop. Everything.
Oh, dang.
Hold the show. I have to ask you this. It was supposed to be in the show notes. I forgot. And this has to be how we end the show.
Okay.
It's because you're an audio guy. I need to know. It was an early episode of the show when we had 4 co-hosts. And I said that Willow was one of the best movies of all time, specifically because of its audio. And I need you to rate that on the Nerd On scale from 1 to 5 stars for its audio.
Oh, for its audio? I mean, it has amazing sound design. But Willow holds a special place in my heart, so it's I'd easily give that. Yeah, it's easily a 12. No, I'd probably give Willow a 4.8, 4.9, way up there. Probably a 5. But I don't know. I need to watch it again. I was actually thinking about it recently.
Dude, we were going off about our I don't remember what we were even talking about on the show, but I was talking about Willow and I sent the trailer to somebody and they were like, "This looks so stupid." I was like, "Dude, this is one of the best movies ever made."
Bro. It's so good. And terrifying too. I remember as a kid watching it, I'm like, this is terrifying. It's like the Never-Ending Story. Terrifying as a kid.
The Mad Mardigan theme is plays in my head like that. That's too good.
So good. Now I want to watch it, and I have it on Blu-ray. Like I was like, honey, we're buying this on Blu-ray. Okay.
Yeah, well, my wife had never seen The Princess Bride until a few weeks ago, so. I know, right? She said that. We were texting in my family group chat about it. Oh, well, we're going to take this offline. Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. We'll see you guys all in 2 weeks with a new episode of the Need to Nerd podcast. Josh, thank you so much for sharing your Need to Nerd with us.
Of course.